Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is a story about what if Naruto trained by Sub-Zero and Scorpion Mortal Kombat. Before I start, please support for more amazing content and do consider subscribing to my channel and share this video with your friends. This is written by TROOPER0007 and link in the description and support writer. Let's start the video. Chapter 1. The Legacy of Hands Masashi. Naruto Uzumaki furiously punched a tree trunk with all of the strength that he could muster in an effort to vent his growing frustrations with Jiraiya. Instead of training him like the Toad Sage had promised, the worthless pervert had ran off with some whore and left him with extremely vague instructions about how to dispel mid-level genjutsu. To add further insult to injury, the bastard had the audacity to steal his wallet that was filled with all the money that he had earned so far on the trip. So far, the entire training trip had been a complete and utter bust in the blonde Jinchuriki's humble opinion. I'm beginning to really wish that I stayed in Konoha and learned things on my own instead of agreeing to this stupid trip. Naruto bitterly thought as he pulled back his bloodied fist from the tree. The tree's trunk had 7 indentions in the shape of fists clustered together in a tight grouping. A very strong indication that it had the great misfortune of being Naruto's makeshift punching bag for several hours at the very least. However, the whiskered blonde wasn't done with it yet as he pulled back his right hand and began forming a Rasengan. This was in direct violation to Jiraiya's orders to not use any chakra without him being present, but Naruto no longer cared anymore about what the Iro-Sennin had said to him. If the bastard wasn't going to keep his promise to train him, then he wasn't going to obey the fool's instructions. Perhaps I should send a message to Bachan and tell her about what Iro-Sennin has been doing on training trip. No, I can't trust any of the toads to send it to her without telling Jiraiya about the letter's contents before actually doing it. Naruto thought as he formed a perfect Rasengan in one hand without the use of a shadow clone. Contrary to the commonly held belief held amongst the inhabitants of Konoha, Naruto wasn't stupid like he tended to act in public. Well, he wasn't book smart like Shikamaru and Sakura were, he was smart in other ways that were a lot more useful in terms of being a shinobi. So well he trusted Gamakichi and Gamatatsu, he knew deep down that they would tell Jiraiya about his letter as they were duty-bound as summons to tell him. Sometimes, Naruto really hated the fact that Jiraiya was the senior summoner to the Toads. Before Naruto could further contemplate about his situation, the sound of thunder boomed over his head and echoed throughout the forest. He let out a string of curses as the fallout of Jiraiya's irresponsible actions had once again caused the repercussions to fall on the Jinchuriki's shoulders. Because the Toad Sage had always them camping in the wilderness to avoid detection from the Akatsuki, Naruto didn't know where the nearest town in the area was. Odds damn it. The blonde yelled out as he started running in a random direction in order to find some form of shelter from the incoming storm. But Jiraiya of the legendary Sannin drunkenly stumbled into a hotel room that he had rented for the evening, using the last of the money that'd been in Naruto's wallet. The Toad Sage didn't feel a single shred of guilty about stealing his apprentice's hard-earned money and using it on his own perverted vices. The way that he figured it, the boy needed to pay a fee in order to be tutored by someone famous like himself. He didn't do it to Minato because he had been obligated to train him on the account of his responsibility as Junin instructor. The boy will forgive me as he's incapable of holding a grudge for very long. Jiraiya muttered to himself as he walked over to the only bed in the room before collapsing on top of it. Just then, the sound of thunder boomed outside of the room's only window, but the Toad Sage didn't pay any mind to it. In his alcohol-addled mind, the incoming storm was a great way for the brat to learn some more survival skills by seeking shelter from the nature's harsh elements. Besides, it was almost impossible for Naruto to get sick as the Kyuubi's chakra boosted his immune system to the point that the dreaded chakra virus could affect him in any way. Thankfully, the feared disease was extremely rare and only existed in nature within the territories of Numa no Kuni. I'll go check up on the annoying brat after I sleep off this buzz and the storm ends. Jiraiya thought as he started drifting off into the realm of dreams. Back with Naruto. Naruto was cautiously exploring the tunnels of a cave that he had found during his effort to find shelter from the storm. He had been extremely fortunate to have come across the cave when he did as it started pouring down within a minute that he had entered it. With nothing better to do at the moment, he decided to explore the cave for the heck of it. But not even 30 feet in, the 13-year-old blonde started noticing something strange about the cave's floor. The floor was unnaturally smooth and flat like someone had taken and removed everything that made the stone natural. Knowing how my luck works, I've probably stumbled onto a secret hideout of the Akatsuki or something. Naruto bitterly thought as he noticed an unlighted torch sitting in an iron holder that was bolted to the wall. With some difficulty, he managed to pry the torch free and pulled out a small lighter that he always carried with him. While almost all ninja would use chakra to handle small things in life like using a fire jutsu to start a campfire, Naruto took a more practical approach to such things. The lighter provided several unique advantages to ninja as it was easy to conceal, didn't require chakra to use, and it didn't act as a homing beacon for sensory-type ninja in the area. But the single flick of the lighter's flint wheel ignition, he was able to light the material inside of the torch's crown. Instantly, his nostrils were filled with the smell of burning sulfur and limestone. The light emanating from the torch began to illuminate a 5-foot radius around him. While he could still see the clouded light from outside the cave, Naruto knew that it was going to be dark soon, and it was going to be pitch black, with the exception of an occasional bolt of lightning brightening the sky. "Let's see where this tunnel leads me," Naruto muttered as he ventured deeper into the cave. As he moved further and further into the cave, he started noticing a series of carvings on the walls that told a story that the teen couldn't decipher. From what he figured was that one person tried to take over the world, but they were stopped by a group of people that opposed the first person. There were other carvings on the walls, but they weren't as impressive as the first one. After what seemed to be eternity of walking in an endless void, Naruto entered into a large cavern. As he looked around, he noticed a series of medium-sized stone fireballs that were strategically placed around the room. Not wanting to spend any more time holding a torch than he needed to, Naruto started lighting the bowls in a systematic manner. When he was done, the cavern was well lit and the Jinchuriki was greeted to the side of a brown chest sitting on top of a raised platform on the other side of the room. With his curiosity getting the best of him, he walked over to it and gave it a quick look over. "Let's see, it has a simple lock system that I can easily pick. Thank God, I learned how to pick them during my time at the Konoha orphanage." Naruto thought as he recalled the dark reasons behind the necessity to learn how to pick locks in the first place. Without hesitation, he walked over to the chest and pulled out a set of lockpicking tools. Like with the use of a lighter, many of today's shinobi look down on lockpicking as a skill that was beneath them, as they could simply melt the lock with a well-placed fire jutsu and be done with it. So Naruto just happened to be one of the few non-Anbu ninja in Konohagakure that was actually capable of locking picking. Not that having such a skill improved the villagers' already low opinion about him in the slightest. Picking the lock had been absolute child's play to the point that he could have done it in his sleep with little difficulty. When he opened the chest, he was disappointed to find a single kunai and a scroll that was being held shut by a wax seal that had a stylized scorpion in the center. With a disappointed sigh, Naruto grabbed the scroll from the chest and looked at it. Judging by its age, the scroll was ancient as there was several holes in it that could only occur with natural aging. Might as well open it and see if there's anything useful in it. If not, I'll give it to Pervy Sage and see if he can figure it out. He mentally figured as he carefully opened the scroll to avoid damaging it beyond use. But the degree of delicacy that he wasn't known for, Naruto gently broke the wax seal and unrolled the scroll to reveal its contents to him. To his internal surprise and utter confusion, the message that was written on the scroll were written in modern-day kanji. Why would an ancient scroll have a writing system that's been around for only a few hundred years? With nothing better to do, he started reading the scroll aloud. To whomever finds this scroll and is able to read it, my name is Hans Masashi, I am the last of the original Jiraiya and former revenant of the Netherim. It has been deemed by fate that you have been chosen to become my successor, but only if you willingly consent to it. If you agree to this, you shall be infused with the same hellfire that was used to turn me into an undead specter and gain all of my abilities. You'll become the new scorpion and head of the new Jiraiya clan. All you need to do is pick up the kunai in the chest and be judged by the flames of hell. If you are deemed worthy by the hellfire, then you will gain access to the Jiraiya clan scrolls on Taijutsu and Ninjutsu to help rebuild it. All that I ask is that you make the clan into something honorable and defend your realm from external threats that will come for it. I wish the best of luck to you, Hans Masashi. Naruto spoke with a stunned look on his face. He looked incredulously at the kunai that was still resting at the bottom of the open chest. Now that he looked at it, he could sense the negativity being emitted by the weapon that he had somehow managed to ignore when he had first opened the chest. As he looked at it, the blonde Jinchuriki contemplated his next move. If he chose to become the new scorpion, he would be confirming the beliefs of the villagers about him being a spawn of hell. But at the same time, he would have enough power to defend himself from the Akatsuki and protect the few friends that he had. After several minutes of mentally debating the pros and cons of picking up the kunai, Naruto decided in favor of picking up the kunai and becoming the new scorpion. As soon as he grabbed a hold of the weapon and lifted it out of the chest, his entire body became engulfed in unholy flames. It was the most painful experience that he had ever had in his short and miserable life. It was even worse than the time that he had fought Sasuke at the Valley of the End. However, he gritted his teeth and endured it for the sake of his friends. He endured the pain for 30 minutes as the fat on his body was burned away by the flames and his body started growing in height. By the time that his body stopped growing, the flames had died away to reveal a new and greatly improved Naruto. He had gone from a puny 149 centimeters to an impressive height of 188 centimeters. His new muscular and athletic body was completely devoid of body fat that had been gained from eating unhealthy foods. His kill orange jumpsuit had been burned away, but only to be replaced by a black and yellow shinobi shimizoku. For those that are wondering what Naruto's outfit looks like, it's Scorpion's MKX tournament costume with the swords from Mortal Kombat 9. Naruto opened his eyes and looked down at his new and improved body with great amazement. He felt like he could take on the entire elemental nations and bring them to their knees without breaking a sweat. Also, he was finally free of that wretched jumpsuit that Jiraiya forced him to keep wearing. "I'm liking this new and greatly improved version of you, Naruto-kun." A feminine voice spoke in a very seductive manner. Naruto looked up and saw a beautiful woman standing in front of him. She was roughly 165 centimeters tall and had a hergless figure that seemed to enlarge her perky teacup breasts. Her skin was porcelain white and highlighted her amber-colored eyes. On her cheeks were 6 whisker-like scars with 3 on each cheek, while she had black fox-like ears on the top of her head that blended perfectly into her raven-colored hair. Behind her were 9 white tails that resembled of a fox's singular tail. Finally, she was completely naked as the day as she was born, and it showed that she was completely devoid of any hair on her body that wasn't on her tails or head. "Hey KK Kikbi?" he asked in a sputtering manner as he pointed a finger at her. The foxy woman nodded her head in confirmation as she gave a small smile that showed off her pearly white teeth with a pair of larger than normal canines rooted in her upper jaw. "That's right, Naruto-kun. I am the mighty Kikbi no Yoko that had attacked and devastated your village on the day of your birth." The identified Kikbi answered as she crossed her arms underneath her chest that caused her to push her breasts up and accentuate them. Unable to process the fact that the naked woman standing in front of him was the very same Kikbi that had been sealed inside of him by his former childhood idol. Naruto did the first thing that came into his mind. He fainted on the spot. Well, he took it a lot better than I expected. I'm going to have so much fun tease him and that perverted hermit for the next year. The Kikbi muttered to herself as she uncrossed her arms and summoned some clothing to wear that would stop the pervert from trying to hit on her like she was some kind of whore. The only person that was allowed to look at her naked form was currently unconscious on the cavern's floor with swirling eyes. But she more than willing to allow a handful of women join that exclusive group as long as they were willing to recognize Naruto as their undisputed master. Unknown location. The god known as Jin was quietly meditating inside of the chamber that contained the realm's Jinsei or life force. It had been almost 10 millennia since he had been appointed the guardian of the new realm that was created by the merging of Edenia and Earthrealm following the defeat of a corrupted Raiden. While it pained him to have a hand in Raiden's removal as the guardian of Earthrealm, but the wind god knew that it needed to be done for the safety of all realms. It had been a sad day for Earthrealm when the god that had done so much to defend it was banished to the realm of lost souls. Before he could reminisce any more about the distant past, he felt a familiar energy flare up in the direction of the continent that the elemental nations resided on. Despite never meeting Hansm during the ninja's time as a revenant, he had become familiar with the man's personal hellfire on the few occasions that they crossed paths in between the Netherrealm War and Shinnok's second attempt at corrupting the Jinsei. So he knew that Scorpion's successor had finally appeared. "Despite you being dead for 10 millennia, I'm going to honor our agreement and help bring about the resurrection of the Shirai Ryu for a 3rd time." Jin thought to himself as he got up from his meditation mat and walked over to a table that had a vial rack sitting on top of it. Resting in the rack were 3 vials that contained the souls of 3 women that had been pre-selected by the elder gods to take part in this harebrained scheme. Each soul had its own color that seemed to represent the color that they favored to wear in life. The soul in the vial on the far right was royal blue, the soul in the center vial was emerald green, while the soul in vial on the far left was blood red. Thanks in part to a spell that he put on the kunai that would transfer Hansm's powers and abilities into his successor, the wind god already knew the age and appearance of Naruto Uzumaki. So he knew what age to make the new bodies for the souls of the 3 women. Hopefully, a resurrected Shirai Ryu will be enough to defend the realm from external threats. Jin muttered as he grabbed the 3 vials before leaving to the Sky Temple's library to turn the 3 women back into living beings. Chapter 2. A very upsetting revelation and surprising explanations. Warning. There's going to be major Jiraiya bashing in this chapter. Using a full body mirror that she had conjured out of thin air, Kikbi inspected the clothing that she had created. The clothing that she had created was based off of the traditional clothing that people had worn before Kagyle Tsutsuki came to this world and tried to enslave humanity. She had added her own touches to make it more unique by replacing the long skirt with a short one and modifying the top to reveal more of her creamy white skin. After all, the stories about female kitsune had always depicted them as seductive tricksters and she wanted to live up to the stories. "I think that my breasts are a little bit on the small side," Kikbi thought as she groped her own breasts. Thankfully, she still had access to her chakra and started pumping a minuscule amount of it into her hands as she started messaging her breasts. She let out a pleasured moan as her breasts started slowly growing from a respectable 86 centimeters to a staggering 90 centimeters. Satisfied with the new size of her breast, Kikbi quickly cut off the supply of chakra to her hands. With great reluctance, the kitsune let go of her impressive mammaries and inspected her new appearance in the mirror. I really hope that Naruto-kun likes my breasts as he's going to be the only person that's allowed to touch them. She commented with a small glance over to her former container. The teen was still unconscious from seeing her naked form for the very first time. Granted, she understood that it was the first time that he had seen a woman naked, as the instructors at the academy had kicked him out of the sexual education classes in the hopes of preventing him from reproducing. She couldn't trust the perverted hermit to properly teach Naruto about sex. So it was up to her to teach him about the birds and the bees. When we return to the village, I'll grant them a quick and painless death for allowing me to have the privilege of teaching him. Kikbi thought with a malevolent grin on her heart-shaped face. Just then, Naruto let out a silent groan that indicated that he was starting to come to. With a simple wave of her hand, the mirror vanished and she started sensually walked over to her self-proclaimed mate. Once she reached him, she knelt down and waited for him to fully regain consciousness. They needed to have a very important discussion that'd been put off for too long. He deserved to know the whole truth. When Naruto awoke from his sudden nap, he found the woman that was claiming to be the Kikbi kneeling over him and looking at him. Despite the fear that he was feeling at the moment, he couldn't help to admire the woman's beauty, as it was far greater than any woman that he had seen before. "I'm glad to see that you're awake, Naruto-kun," the woman said with a warm smile that would brighten anyone's day. Naruto let out a pained groan as he slowly sat up from the uncomfortable ground as the woman used a single hand to prevent him getting up too fast. It was pretty clear to the blonde that the woman was a lot stronger than what her body's petite form would imply at first glance. "Easy there, we don't want you to black out again," the woman said softly. She knew that the boy was extremely stubborn and often wouldn't listen to reason without it being beaten into his head. She could simply contribute it to his Uzumaki heritage, as that clan was easily the most stubborn and pig-headed lot of people that she had the distinct displeasure of knowing. And again, it could easily be a defense mechanism that he had instinctively developed over the years to increase his chances of survival on Konoha's harsh streets. "Are you really the Kikbi?" Naruto asked the woman. The Kikbi nodded her head in confirmation to Naruto's question. "But how?" he feebly asked in shock. According to Jiraiya, the seal that the Yondaime Hokage used to seal the Kikbi was designed to keep the tailed beast locked away until freed by an external force or his death. But somehow the Kikbi had gotten free when he had touched that kunai in the chest to gain the power of hellfire. "When your father summoned the Shinigami to seal half of me inside of you, he had summoned one of the elder gods to carry it out. Apparently, the elder gods knew that you were destined to become the new Scorpion and decided to install a failsafe to ensure that I was released at the right time. So when you picked up the empowered kunai and the energies of the Netherim entered your body, it activated the failsafe," the Kikbi explained to her former container. Naruto could only nod his head dumbly as it sort of made sense that the elder gods would have a hand in freeing her. It was rumored that the elder gods had the ability to see into the future and they used this ability to manipulate events behind the scenes to ensure proper balance between the realms. "But how are you a woman? The last time that we talked, you sounded and acted like a male," he pointed out to the vixen. Granted, the last time that they had a conversation was when Jiraiya had thrown him off of a cliff and it summed up to him demanding the tail beast's chakra. So it wasn't entirely impossible that he had overlooked a few things in his urgent need to save his life from a swift and abrupt end. "It's a bizarre situation that involves the fourth Hokage stupidity and the hellfire that merged with your soul," the Kikbi commented. When it came to Minato Namikaze's many skills, foresight and understanding human nature weren't on the list. The man had failed to consider the idea that the villagers of Konoha would take out their anger on the person that was used to imprison her, nor did he consider the possibility that his former sensei would shirk his responsibilities as a godfather to go peeping on women. Simply put, the Yondaime had failed to create backup plans to ensure that his offspring would have a normal childhood. "What do you mean?" Naruto asked. Kikbi smirked internally at the open display of eagerness for information that her former container was showing. She was going to use this opportunity to smear the Yondaime's name and reputation with harsh truths, as well as weaken her mate's connections to that ungrateful village. After all, it would be impossible to carry out his responsibilities as a defender of the realm as long as he remained loyal to Konoha. "Like I said, your father summoned an elder god to seal my yang chakra inside of you." In his great haste, he had foolishly forgotten the fact that the yin-yang has a multitude of different meanings behind it and incorrectly assumed that in case of a soul's yang half that it was completely associated with masculinity. In truth, the yang is connected to positives that a soul has experienced over a person's lifetime, she started explaining to Naruto. Naruto nodded his head as he was familiar with the Taoist concept of yin-yang, as it was often used at the academy as an analog to the physical and spiritual energies inside of the human body that were needed to create chakra. Of course, he hadn't known about it until it was explained to him by Sakura and Kakashi during the mission to the Land of Waves. When they had returned, he snuck into the village public library during the night and looked it up. Almost all of the positive things that I have experienced in life had occurred during the century that I've had been sealed inside of two women that were my jailers before you. So it's only natural that most of my yang chakra would become feminine and the majority of my yin chakra would become masculine. The Kikbi continued. Again, Naruto nodded his head in understanding as it made sense in a weird kind of way that the roles of yin and yang would flip like the way that the Kikbi described. When the energies of hellfire entered your body, it burned away what was left of my yin chakra before it connected itself to the part of you that contains every negative feeling that you ever felt. The Kikbi finished explaining to the fledgling human revenant hybrid. Naruto remained silent for a few minutes as he contemplated on everything that he had just heard from the Kikbi. That's when something struck his mind about everything that the vixen had just said to him. When she had interchanged the Yondaime Hokage with the word father on several occasions. The former Jinchuriki didn't want to know the truth, but a large part of him needed to know the truth. During your explanation, you said that the Yondaime was my father. Is this true? He hesitantly asked the former Bijk. The side of the Kikbi's ears drooping down was all the confirmation that Naruto needed in order to know that she had been telling the truth. It felt like somebody had punched him in the stomach with a pair of brass knuckles and kicked him in the balls with a studded steel toe boot at the same time. To know that his father and the man that was responsible for his shitty life until now were one and the same was the ultimate form of betrayal. So he did the only that he could do. He started laughing uncontrollably. Just let it all out, Naruto-kun. Kikbi thought to herself as she simply watched. Soon Naruto's laughter turned into sobs as the realization that his own father had basically used him as a sacrificial pawn for the sake of an ungrateful village. He had always believed that his parents had been killed on the night of his birth, but he had imagined them dying heroically in defending the village or protecting him. But to learn that his father had died in the process of turning him into the village's most hated pariah had shattered those dreams. It's alright, Naruto-kun. Everything is going to be alright. Kikbi softly muttered as she embraced him in a comforting hug. Elsewhere with Jiraiya pacing back and forth in his hotel room like a caged animal as the storm continued unabated with no signs of stopping. It was like the storm gods had opened up the very heavens and unleashed this typhoon across the elemental nations, if the weather reports on the radio were true. So he was stuck in town with nothing to do as the town's only brothel had burned down after being struck by lightning. To further add to his problems, Tsunade had sent a message that demanded a submitted report about the apprenticeship's progress from both him and Naruto. I can't falsify a written report from Naruto as his handwriting is too neat for me to successfully replicate and Tsunade would recognize it as a fake within seconds. Jiraiya grimly thought as he recalled the brat's near-perfect writing that looked like decorative calligraphy. It was one of the few times that he cursed the villagers for ostracizing his godson to the point that the blonde-haired teen had developed fine motor skills to such a degree. The fact that he developed a fierce independent streak on par with his Uzumaki ancestors just added more problems. The Toad Sage needed the boy to be docile and malleable enough to his ideas that it would ensure that the prophecy came true in a way that ensured Konoha's survival at the expense of the other shinobi villages. It was a shitty thing to do, but it was for the greater good of the village. I need to figure out a way to convince Naruto to write a report that tells Tsunade that everything is okay. But how? Jiraiya muttered as the sound of thunder boomed with enough force to cause the room's window to shake in its frame. Using Kenjutsu was out of the question as Tsunade would check for any additional seals placed on Naruto as soon as they got back. Also, he was worried that a memory seal might somehow weaken the seal that kept the Kikbi in check. Jinjutsu was out as well as he simply didn't have the chakra control or reserves to maintain one for a long period of time on someone like Naruto. So he didn't have a single freaking clue on what to do about the situation. Damn it. Why does everything that involves the brat have to be so complicated? The Toad Sage loudly complained as he clenched his hands into fists. As Jiraiya tried to figure out a way to save his own skin from Tsunade's very justifiable wrath, the storm continued to rage with an incomparable fury. It was as if the gods in the heavens were disgusted with his actions and were showing their displeasure with this massive storm. Back with Naruto, the despondent Naruto sat on top of a boulder located at the mouth of the cave as he contemplated over his entire life in Konoha. Thanks to the removal of the Kikbi's potent chakra from his body, he was able to stop acting like a rabbit with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder and focus on things for extended periods of time. So with nothing better to do, he decided to look back at his terrible childhood in order to find signs of abuse that he had previously overlooked or ignored. So far, he had found over 700 instances of abuse, and that was just when he was only 4 years old. The only positive things that I can recall from that time is meeting Tuchi and Am, Naruto muttered as he watched a rain drop from the sky as thunder boomed overhead on occasion to create a beautiful melody of nature. He moved on to the 7 years that he spent at the village's ninja academy and found that I wasn't any better. Most of his teachers would remove him from the classroom for the littlest things or sabotage his education by giving him faulty equipment or giving tests with questions that only Jinin or higher would be capable of answering. His classmates would constantly tease him for not knowing the answer to questions being asked by the teachers or bully him at their parents' encouragement. The only person at the academy that seemed to give a fair chance was Iruka. Too bad that he had acted like a spoiled brat to recognize it at the time. Before he could contemplate about his life any further, he felt Kikbi's impressive bust pressed against his back and her breathing softly in his ear. "What do you want, Ari?" he calmly asked as he tried to keep blood from flowing down to a certain part of his anatomy. After he had recovered from the shock at learning that his father was responsible for his shitty life, he and Ari had settled down to figure out a believable cover story to give to Jiraiya about her appearance. They came up with Ari being kidnapped at a very young age by a mad doctor that wanted to improve humanity by splicing animal DNA into the human genome. For 11 years, she developed fox-like appendage as the doctor genetically altered her. Finally, she managed to escape from her imprisonment after the doctor's lab caught on fire by accident. She spent the last few months wandering around the elemental nations in order to try to find way back to her old village. They came up with the name of Ari for the Kikbi to use after a long discussion about a suitable name for her to use. Both of them had agreed that calling her the Kikbi in front of others would cause too many unwanted questions to be asked by certain people and a number of undesirable elements to try committing despicable acts against her. "Why don't you come back to the cavern, there's something that I want to give you," Ari seductively whispered into his ear. Just hearing her speak like that was enough for Naruto to lose what little control over his manhood that he had left. With a quick mutter of okay, he was suddenly being dragged back to the cavern that had changed his life for the better. As soon as they entered the cavern, Ari turned around and ripped his mask off. Before he questioned what she was doing, Ari slammed her lips onto his and forced her tongue into his mouth. Naruto didn't know if it was instincts or something else that drove him into accepting Ari's sudden action, but he was soon returning her kisses with equal force. After a solid minute of kissing, they separated in order to catch their breath. Soon, the two of them were disrobing and showing their naked bodies to each other. For Naruto, it was like he was staring at a goddess that was unequaled in terms of beauty amongst mortals. Her pale white and blemish-free skin perfectly matched the skin complexion that was viewed as the ideal skin tone in the elemental nations. Her hergless figure seemed to accentuate her large and perky breasts that were adorned with dark brown nipples that were the size of small buttons. Her amber-colored eyes were hypnotic for him to look at. Her raven black hair looked like fine silk, while the white fur on her tails looked soft and fluffy. Everything about her heart-shaped face was perfectly symmetrical in appearance. On the flip side, Ari viewed Naruto as the perfect Adonis, as he had gone through major changes because of the hellfire. In addition to his impressive height, his body had become more muscular and athletic, as his core had developed into a visible six-pack that a person could eat from. The whisker-like scars on his face had faded away for the most part, while his hair and eyes stayed the same. He seemed to secrete a fearsome aura that caused her animalistic instincts to view him as the ultimate alpha male. "I need you inside of me, right now," Ari exclaimed as she gave a fierce kiss to her soon-to-be lover. Unable to continue supporting her body's weight, Ari's limbs gave out and caused her to collapse onto the floor. Thankfully, her massive breasts were able to cushion the fall and prevent any sort of injury. Naruto chuckled softly at the passed-out Kitsune as he carefully picked her up and walked over to a pile of straw that was covered with a thick linen mat. Like with the mirror that she had created earlier, the makeshift bed was something that Ari had conjured for them to use as they waited for the storm pass on. "Sleep well, my foxy princess," Naruto softly muttered as he gently placed her on the mat. But that being done, he laid down behind her and started spooning her. With one final tender kiss to the side of her neck, he joined her in the realm of dreams. In a hidden location, Shimura was always looking for new ways to ensure that his ninja were operating at peak efficiency without their troublesome emotions getting in the way. So when a team of his root ninja discovered an ancient factory that contained detailed blueprints onto turning humans into cyborgs, he was deeply intrigued by the discovery. Wanting to know more about the process, he sent a researcher by the name of Tanuki Shigaraki to find out more about and report back with information. What the man found there was anything beyond what the old warhawk could dream up. An invincible army of cybernetic ninja with advanced weaponry that would obey his every order without question. Without a second thought on the ethical or moral implications, he sent the order to his agents that they were to collect everything at the derelict factory that was needed to perform the procedure. "Soon, I will have a completely obedient army of cyborgs that will let me bring Konoha to its rightful place in the world," Dansum thought as he looked at an open manila folder that had a piece of paper with an emblem sketched onto it. The emblem was that a three-pronged chakram that was interlocked with an inverted triangle. Chapter 3. Gathering of the Shadows. Jiraiya was on the verge of having a panic attack as he frantically searched the area of the forest that he had left Naruto before heading into town to go binge drinking and pick up some prostitutes. The blasted storm had lasted the entire week and he'd been forced to remain in town until it had finally moved on. Unfortunately, he had been forced to leave Konoha's main deterrent from external threats by himself for the entire time without any form of supervision. This meant that a roving bounty hunter or agent of the Akatsuki could have captured him and taken to who knows where. By the I God in the heavens above, Tsunade is going to freaking kill me. The Toad Sage fearfully thought as he continued searching for the blonde-haired ninja. So far, he had only managed to find a waterlogged backpack that belonged to Naruto. Now he was really starting to worry about the situation as he had explicitly told the boy to never leave it behind at any cost. Now the perverted seal master was really starting to worry about his own health. While a good majority of Konoha wouldn't lose any sleep over the village's Yunchkriki disappearance, it was the minority that worried him. He was already trying to figure out a believable story about the boy's disappearance that would prevent him from being lynched by this deadly group. Naruto. Jiraiya yelled out as panic started to set in. As the Toad Sage started having a mental meltdown, a strange man silently appeared out of a vortex of azure blue energy. The man was wearing a black and steel-gray bodysuit with a scarlet-red sash being worn across his chest. On the man's back was a sheathed katana that was emitting a reddish glow. The stranger had a clean-shaven face and a full head of silver-colored hair that could only occur with natural aging. Finally, the man's eyes glowed blue with pure energy that was similar in color to the vortex that he had appeared in. If you're looking for a young man in this area, then I suggest trying the cave that's about half-kilometer that way. The man said as he pointed towards the east. Jiraiya nearly jumped out of skin at hearing the man's voice, as he had believed that no one would come within miles of this place. He turned around and gave a suspicious glare at the man that had been able to sneak up on a legendary Sannin without making a single sound, something that should be impossible to do. Apparently, that notion had been proven dead wrong by this strange man standing in front of him. "Who are you?" The Toad Sage demanded in a threatening manner. The man chuckled at Jiraiya like he had heard some kind of funny joke. "I'm just a wandering swordsman from Kaminari no Kuni that's simply passing through this forest," the man said in a calm manner. Jiraiya frowned as he tried to find any sort of line in the man's explanation. While the majority of citizens from Kaminari had darker skin tone than most people of the elemental nations, it wasn't impossible for them to have a lighter skin tone that was similar to what everyone in Hai no Kuni had. It was uncommon for wandering swordsmen from the peninsula to migrate down into the continent, but it did happen on occasion. Unable to find any flaw in the explanation, the Toad Sage was forced to believe it. "Fine, I believe your story. But what's this about a young man?" the spy master of Konoha questioned. With any luck, the person being described to him was Naruto, and Jiraiya could go back to figuring out a way to convince the brat into fabricating a report to Tsunade that said everything was okay. "Like I said earlier, there's a young man taking shelter at a cave that's half-kilometer that way," the blind swordsman said as he again pointed in the direction of the cave. Jiraiya's eyes narrowed at the suspicious manner that the supposedly blind man knew the general direction of the cave. Then again, it was rumored that a person's sense of hearing would become more acute in the event that they lose the ability to see for whatever reason. So it was possible that he had somehow heard a young man's voice in the area, as it would be more distinct than the sounds of nature. "Arigato," the Toad Sage said rudely before he took off in the direction that the swordsman had pointed towards. The blind man slowly lowered his arm as he heard Jiraiya leap away from him. Thanks to years of hard and rigorous training, his sense of hearing had turned into something similar to the echolocation that whales and dolphins use to locate prey in the dark waters of the ocean. Of course, him being magically turned into a human-Edenian hybrid had allowed him to practice honing the skill for several millennia. That poor fool, he's so obsessed with Gamamaru's prophecy that he fails to realize that it no longer has any significant meaning to this world. The swordsman calmly spoke as he prepared to teleport himself to the Sky Temple. But that being said and done, the blind swordsman teleported away from the area. With Jiraiya, the Toad Sage was running through forest at breakneck speed as he headed in the direction that the swordsman had pointed towards. With any luck, he'll find Naruto and buy the blonde-haired idiot's forgiveness with a promise of teaching him a new technique. Of course, the white-haired Sannin had no intention of keeping such promise as he agreed with the civilian council that the boy having too much power was not a good thing for Konoha's populace. The brat might try to extract some form of retribution against the villagers for all the years of abuse that he had suffered. Despite the brat having any sort of justifiable anger towards the village for his past treatment, he needs to learn how to put the entire village's interests before his own. Jiraiya silently muttered as he spotted a cave in distance. When he was around 50 feet away from the cave's entrance, Naruto just happened to walk out of it at that very moment. Jiraiya wanted to rush the boy and give him a bear hug, as it meant that Tsunade wasn't going to skin him for losing the village's main line of defense against other Jinchuriki and her adoptive grandson. But something felt off about the entire situation, and the sage's instincts told him to take cover behind a tree. Without any hesitation, he did so and looked at a new and improved Naruto from a safe distance. "What the hell?" Jiraiya thought as he used his years of peeking at women to observe the blonde-haired ninja that he was supposed to be training. Even from this distance, the Toad Sage could tell that this wasn't the same brat that he had left for a few days of pleasure and fun at the local brothel. For starters, he had somehow managed to grow 43 centimeters and more muscular within the week. The brat ditched the bright kill me neon orange jumpsuit for a black and yellow shimizu with a skeletal motif. Finally, the boy's eyes had become much colder than they had been before. Something happened in the last week that caused Naruto to change into his present form, and Jiraiya didn't like it at all. "You come out from hiding, pervy sage. I know that you're out there." Naruto called out as he looked in the general direction that Jiraiya was hiding in. Jiraiya sighed as he knew that there was no point in hiding anymore if the brat knew that he was here. The Toad Sage put on the mask of a relieved teacher and stepped out from behind of the tree with a smile on his face. "I finally found you, Naruto. You can't believe how worried I was when I only found your backpack at the camping site," Jiraiya exclaimed with a voice of false cheer. The next thing that the Toad Sage knew, there was hard thud sound behind him and a slight stinging sensation emanating in his right cheek. He placed a hand on the spot that the feeling was coming from and removed it to find his own blood staining his fingers. If the brat's outstretched arm was anything to go by, then he wasn't very happy to see him at the moment. "You have a lot of nerve showing up and pretending to be glad to see me, Irobaka. You fucking left me in the forest for an entire week while you stole my hard-earned money to use it on whores and alcohol at the nearest town. The only reason why I haven't notified Bachan about these repeated incidents is because I can't trust the toads with delivering the message without telling you," Naruto angrily commented as he lowered his arm. Jiraiya's eyes widened in shock at the revelation that Naruto knew about his orders to the Toad Summons to keep him from telling Tsunade about the real situation of the training trip. Clearly, he had greatly underestimated the brat's capacity to have critical thinking in situations that involved him. "Hey, it's not my fault that you're incapable of keeping your wallet from being stolen by others. Besides, think of it as me collecting my fee from tutoring you," Jiraiya said as he tried to justify his actions. However, this response seemed to only make Naruto angrier as it was clear that the blonde wasn't buying it. "How am I supposed to protect something as small as a wallet when I have to do everything around camp because you're too lazy to do your share of chores? Also, that's not how an apprenticeship works and you know it." Naruto angrily snarled out as he started leaking enough chakra from his body to make it visible to the naked eye. Now, Jiraiya was really worried about the situation as such open displays of chakra usage acted like homing beacons to sensory ninja. While he wasn't sure of the Akatsuki having any sensory ninja within their ranks, he knew that they had a spy network that rivaled his own. So he needed to calm the brat down in case a sensory ninja on their peril was in the area. "You need to calm down, Naruto," Jiraiya yelled out in panic as he was starting to get flashbacks of the one time that he tried to loosen the seal that kept the Kikbi locked up. Because of his reckless action, he almost freed the demon fox from its imprisonment and got himself beaten to within an inch of his life. "No. I've had it with your bullshit, Jiraiya. I'm heading back to Konoha and telling Bachan that this entire training trip was a complete and utter farce. Also, you can expect criminal charges being leveled against you for the stunts that you've pulled on me for the last year," Naruto furious yelled out at the Toad Sage. Before Jiraiya could plead for the blonde to reconsider his course of action, a woman stepped out of the cave and the Toad Sage's words died in his mouth. The woman was an absolute bombshell that easily rivaled the beauty of Tsunade and several other women living in Konoha. He was willing to ignore the fox-like features as women with zoomorphic traits was actually really popular throughout the elemental nations, with catgirls being the most popular. "When did you meet such a bombshell, brat?" the pervert asked as he let out a perverted giggle. He wanted to pull out his notebook and write down the girl's traits and features for his next book, but was stopped by the copious amount of killer intent that Naruto was releasing. "That's none of your fucking business, you perverted failure of a teacher. And if I find out that you use Ari-chan for one of trashy novels, I will fucking murder you." The blonde-haired revenant spoke demonically as his newly implanted scorpion persona started to take over. Now, it was time for Jiraiya to get serious as he knew that Naruto had threatened to kill him. With the way that the boy's voice had sounded at the very end, the boy might be tapping into the Kikbi's chakra and it would give him the strength to carry out such a threat. In the battle between self-preservation and perverseness, it was a rare victory for the self-preservation of the brain to win over the Toad Sage's perverseness. "Come on, Ari-chan. We're ending this farce of a training trip and heading back to Konoha." Naruto spoke as he started walking south towards the land of fire. Jiraiya could only remain silent as this new Naruto had arbitrarily declared the training trip to be over. A part of him was glad that the boy was calling it quits as it meant that he could go back to research for his next masterpiece, but another part of him was furious that he had been insulted by an ungrateful brat. Sure, he had failed to keep his end of the bargain and actually train the brat like he had promised to do. But that didn't give the snot-nosed punk the right to insult him like that. To vent out some of his anger, the Toad Sage formed a Rasengan in left hand and thrusted it into a nearby tree. The tree exploded into thousands of splinters from the amount of chakra that had been put into the technique. Back in Konoha, in a very rare moment of alertness for them, the council of the Nara clan were sitting around a roaring fire located in the center of the meeting chamber. Each of them had a serious expression on their faces as they contemplated over the information that they had just received. Recently, the clan's diviners had made a disturbing discovery in the crack patterns in the stag shoulder blade that been heated. While Futamani had been used since ancient times, it had repeatedly proven to be more reliable than other means of divinations. Are you sure that the diviners read the crack patterns correctly, Shikaku? We don't want to prematurely initiate any of the plans that our ancestors had created in case such a terrible incident was foreseen. One of the council elders nervously pointed out to the clan head of the Nara clan. Shikaku nodded his head in understanding at what his clansman was trying to say, as jumping the gun might make things a lot worse than before. Thankfully, the clan's ancestors had created several dozen contingency plans to minimize the damage caused in the possible event of that happening. I had our diviners double and triple check the patterns, as well as use additional stag shoulder blades to check the accuracy of their divinations. All of their results came back as the same as the first pattern. Shikaku responded in a typical blunt manner. The council of elders began whispering amongst themselves at the amount of energy that was spent to ensure the authenticity of a diviner's prediction. However, they couldn't fault their clan head's precaution, as they were dealing with a situation that could possibly bring about the return of the Warring States era or something more. What do we do then? A second member of the clan council asked in a tense voice over the hushed whispers of the council members. The room went quiet and all eyes turned toward Shikaku for answers. Knowing that his following words would have a huge impact on the fate of the clan, the scared-faced man remained silent for a few minutes as he contemplated on the course of action that they should take. Unfortunately, they had limited options at the moment, as most of the contingency plans were woefully out of date on the account of the Nara clan's infamous laziness. However, there was still one plan that was available to them, but it was the most dangerous one. I'll talk to the Hokage about enrolling my son into the Anbu Black Ops to receive proper training. Once he's done with training, we'll begin the Shadow Wraith protocol. The clan head reluctantly informed the clan council. As soon as the words left his mouth, the room exploded into a torrent of arguments as the elders quickly divided into two camps of opinions about the subject. Both sides had merits for their arguments towards the Shadow Wraith protocol, but it wasn't up to decided on the issue. On one side was the camp that supported initiating the Shadow Wraith protocol, as it would allow the clan to create an unparalleled warrior of the shadows that hadn't been seen since from the Warring States era. A time when the Nara clan's ninja warriors were widely feared and respected by all for their unrivaled stealth capabilities. On the other side was the group that opposed such an action, as they justifiably feared that none of the current generation was capable of handling the transformation process. The last time that they tried to do it, the entire thing ended in disaster with 20 clansmen died by the subject's hands. I finally understand the ordeal that you had to go through on that terrible night, Minato. Shikaku thought to himself as he recalled the night that the fourth Hokage had sealed the Kikbi into his only son in order to save the village. As the council argued back and forth about the merits of the Shadow Wraith protocol, the head of the Nara clan thought back to Minato's actions on that night. In the process of protecting the village from a serious threat, he had effectively abandoned his only child to a fate worse than death. While the Shikaku's brain rationalized his deceased friend's action as a necessary evil for the good of the village, his heart was completely appalled at the idea of turning a child into a living weapon. Enough. Shikaku barked out to his advisors. The clan council went silent as they realized that the leader was speaking to them. I will stand firm with my decision and will speak to the Hokage about enrolling my son into the Anbu Black Ops in a couple of days. In the meantime, I want all of you to get everything ready as secretly as possible, without alerting anyone in the village or our fellow clansmen. Do I make myself clear? Shikaku spoke in a voice that left no room for discussion. The anti-Wraith Protocol faction grumbled out a discontent agreement before being dismissed alongside the pro-Wraith Protocol faction by Shikaku. When the head of the Nara clan was alone in the room, he let out a sigh of discontentment at the next big hurdle that he to face. Lying to his beloved wife about enrolling Shikamaru into the Anbu Black Ops. Admittedly, it was not a very appealing prospect for the village's foremost strategist. As he got up to carry out his tasks, he turned his head and looked at a small hanging scroll that depicted an ink wash painting that depicted a small sparrow perched on a tree branch belonging to a cherry blossom tree. It was an inconspicuous painting that wouldn't draw any sort of unwanted attention from an outsider. However, Shikaku knew the dark truth about what was being hidden behind it. There was a small safe that contained the remaining shadowy essences of the being that was largely responsible for the founding of the Nara clan. I can only hope that I'm making the right decision on this. Shikaku muttered as he turned his head away from the painting and walked out of the room. Hitetsu Hagane and Izumo Kamizuki stood nervously outside the Hokage's office as the sound of things being smashed and occasional curse emanated from behind its door. Apparently, Tsunade was grumpier than usual and neither of them were willing to risk becoming her punching bag. So the two Chunin had opted to wait it out until she had calmed down enough for it to be safe to enter without fear of injury. That had been 2 hours ago and it was becoming increasingly clear that the slug Sannin wasn't going to stop her rampage anytime soon. Although, they were wondering what had set her off like this. Damn it, Jiraiya. You had 2 simple jobs on that fucking training trip and you can't even do them correctly. Tsunade's muffled voice yelled out as it was followed the sound of something wooden being broken into 2. The two Chunin could only sweat drop at having their question answered in such a manner. Apparently, some of Jiraiya's actions on the training trip that he was taking with Naruto were somehow responsible for the Hokage's foul mood. If they had to take a wild guess, they figured that he had left Naruto unsupervised for an extended period of time to go peek on some women bathing in a hot spring. Neither of them would be really surprised if that were truly the case. Hey guys. Why are you standing outside of Tsunade-sensei's office with a large stack of papers? Sakura asked as she and Shizune approached them from the left side of the hall. She was answered by the sight of a paperweight smashing through the office door's light and becoming embedded into the wall across the wall. Like her fellow Chunin and Shizune, the pink-haired girl's sweat dropped at the display of strength and anger that Tsunade was showing at the moment. She figured that her sensei was angry about something that involved Naruto. The blonde-haired idiot probably did something stupid and Jiraiya had sent word of it to her. "Sakura, get your ass in here." Tsunade roared out from her office. Sakura looked around to find that Kitetsu, Izumo and Shizune were hiding on the far side of the hallway to avoid provoking Tsunade's wrath. Cursing their unwillingness to enter the office with her, the pink-haired girl went to meet her fate alone. The office was in total shambles as it looked like a hurricane had roared through it. The numerous bookshelves had been smashed to pieces while the desk had been broken in 2. Looking through the office's massive window was a rapidly breathing Tsunade. "You wanted me for something, Tsunade-sensei?" Sakura reluctantly asked with a nervous smile. During her studies under the slug Sannin, the pink-haired Chunin had the misfortune of experiencing getting a chakra-enhanced punch from Tsunade. She had spent the rest of the day in a full-body cast at the hospital as Tsunade had left the village for a very important meeting with the daimon. After that painful ordeal, she had a greater amount of respect for Naruto's ability to tolerate taking such attacks on multiple occasions. "Yes, I want you to head down to Anbu headquarters and tell them that I want Agent Nico to come to my office in 3 hours." Tsunade evenly spoke as she continued to stare out of the window. Sakura's face went pale as she never liked going to Anbu headquarters to deliver messages to them. It was bad enough that she had been exposed to Anko and Ibiki during last year's Chunin exams, but to hear them apply their stock and trade on someone was more than what she could handle. It took a special kind of person to be able to stomach that line of work and she wasn't one of them. Hi, Tsunade-sensei." Sakura stuttered out before she turned around and left to carry out her task. The sooner that she got to Anbu headquarters, the sooner that she could move on to other things that didn't involve Anbu. Tsunade continued to stare out at the village as she played how the council would react to Jiraiya being punished for his actions on the training trip. The shinobi portion would be understanding and supportive of Jiraiya receiving a harsh punishment as they understood what the Toad Sage had done. But on the other side, the people on the civilian council would vehemently protest any sort of punishment as all of them despised Naruto for one reason or another. It came down to her 3 advisors and she didn't know how they would respond to Jiraiya's actions. "Hopefully, they'll side with me on the matter as the perverted idiot put Naruto in unnecessary danger." Tsunade thought as she had a small smirk on her face. It was going to be interesting for her to watch the village elders to struggle on picking a side on the imminent debate between the civilian council and the shinobi council. If they sided with the civilian council, they would lose a lot of credibility amongst the clans and shinobi for allowing Jiraiya to escape punishment. But if they sided with the shinobi council on punishing the Toad Sage, they'll lose a lot of face with the village's non-shinobi populace. It was the worst lose-lose situation for the elders. Later at Anbu headquarters, Ikao Yuzuki was sitting down on a leather couch with her cat-shaped porcelain mask resting on top of the coffee table in front of her. Because they handled most of the village's high-risk missions, Anbu agents were given several benefits and privileges that no one else in the village received. One such benefit was their headquarters was fully stocked with high-quality furniture and expensive luxury items that couldn't be found anywhere in the village. Oftentimes, off-duty agents could be found sleeping on a couch in one of the many lounges that dotted the headquarters. "Hey Kun, it's been over a year since you were murdered and I've missed you ever since." The purple-haired Kunoichi thought to herself as a tear started rolling down her cheek. It had been well known by everyone in Anbu that she and Heiate Jackman had been dating before Heiate was found dead at Kikum Castle. According to the autopsy report, the Takubetsu Jimnin had 3 of his major arteries cut and he had bleed out in a matter of minutes. It also said that even if he had lived through the ordeal, he would have died in a few weeks, as his constant coughing had been a lot more serious than initially believed. Instead of it being a simple case of the whooping cough, it was really a very rare mutation of tuberculosis. It seemed like fate had been conspiring to keep us apart. Ikgao muttered as a soft knocking sound began to emanate from the lounge's door. With quick movement, she grabbed her mask and put it back on before the door could open. Any agent on duty that was caught with their mask off would face severe punishment that ranged from a heavy fine up to around 1 million rim or a dishonorable dismissal from the corps. While some would use a secondary mask to cover the lower half of their face like Kakashi does, it wasn't very practical thing to do in the long run of things. "Come in," she yelled out to the creator of the knocking sound. The door swung open to reveal Anko Mitarashi standing in the doorframe with a grim expression on her face. The former student of Orochimaru was one of the few people working in Anbu that weren't required to wear masks on duty. The only other two that came to mind were Inoichi Yamanaka and Ibiki Marino. All three of them just happened to be members of Konoha's dreaded torture and interrogation unit. "Nico, the Hokage requires your presence at her office immediately." Anko spoke in a serious voice. Ikgao's heart plunged at hearing that she was being summoned to the Hokage's office. A single Anbu agent being summoned by the Hokage was never a good thing, as it usually meant that they were being dismissed from the unit for unbecoming conduct or unsatisfactory work. While they were given a lot of leeway to conduct their assignments as a black ops unit, they were still held to a certain ethical standard. "Did the messenger explain why I'm being summoned by the Hokage?" The sword-wielding Kunoichi asked in an effort to get some information. Much to her displeasure, Anko shook her head in a negative way. "Alright, I'm going. If anyone asks about my whereabouts, tell them that I was summoned by the Hokage." Ikgao ordered her longtime friend as she got up to leave. Within 20 minutes, she was out of Anbu headquarters and running across the village's rooftops as she made her way to the Hokage's office. For the most part, the village had mostly recovered from the surprise attack by the joint military might of Sunagakure and Orochimaru's Itagakure. While they had managed to successfully repulse the invasion, it had revealed serious problems about the academy's training program. "I still can't believe that almost all of the genin team that had graduated that year had been wiped out in a single battle that lasted for 5 hours. Thank the gods that Lady Tsunade ordered a complete overhaul on the academy's curriculum to avoid such casualties in the future." Ikgao thought as she passed by a house displaying a red and white service banner with 2 gold stars in its window. The rest of the journey was uneventful as most people didn't care about an Anbu agent running across the rooftops in the middle of the day. When she had reached the entrance of the academy, the secretary at the front desk buzzed her in without bothering to ask for any sort of identification. It was common knowledge amongst shinobi that the secretary was being paid by the civilian council to spy on the Hokage to gather any useful information for its own agenda. Of course, they countered this by putting the woman in a position that required her remain in one place at all times. "Can you notify the Hokage that Agent Nico has arrived as she has requested?" Ikgao calmly requested from the secretary in a monotone manner. The secretary rudely ignored her in favor of focusing on reading the latest edition of the Daily Konoha. It was a tabloid magazine that was extremely popular amongst the civilian populace as it tended to hyperinflate the deeds of civilian villagers and downplay the accomplishments of shinobi. Needless to say, it was viewed by most shinobi as a vile tool of the civilian council to try and get more power for itself at their expense. "Excuse me, did you hear what I just said?" the swordswoman asked as she yanked the magazine out of the secretary's hands. The secretary shot a nasty look at the person that had the audacity to interrupt her personal reading time. The woman didn't care that she was currently on the clock as her uncle was a sitting member of the civilian council and would prevent the Hokage from firing her. "You seem to have a pair of functioning legs, so go notify the Hokage yourself." The civilian snidely commented to the woman that could kill her in 20 different ways with one hand. Ikgao was greatly incensed by the blatant display of disrespect that this civilian was showing towards her. Not that anyone would be able to see the enraged look that her face was adoring as the porcelain mask on her face prevented people from seeing it. The swordswoman stormed off towards the staircase that led to the floor that housed the Hokage's office to prevent herself from killing the self-entitled bitch. It was a short 20-minute walk up the 7 stories and the purple-haired Kunoichi would use that brief time to try and calm down enough for her meeting with Tsunade. Inhale through the nose and hold breath for 30 seconds, then exhale from the mouth. Inhale through the nose and hold breath for 30 seconds, then exhale from the mouth. Ikgao mentally chanted as she got closer and closer to the Hokage's office. That's when she noticed the 2 large pieces of a broken desk were laid against the wall on the opposite side of the hallway. It didn't take a genius-level intellect to figure out that Lady Tsunade had broken the thing in 2 with her enhanced strength in a fit of rage. Thankfully, it seemed that Ikgao had managed to avoid walking into one of her leader's rampages. With a bit of reluctance, the swordswoman knocked on the office door. "Come in," she heard Tsunade's muffled voice say from within the office. Ikao opened the door to find Tsunade sitting behind a new desk with several stacks of paperwork sitting on top of it. Agent Nico reporting for duty as requested, Lady Hokage. The purple-haired swordswoman spoke in a dutiful and respectful manner. Without looking up from the paperwork in front of her, Tsunade gestured for her to enter the room. Without any hesitation, Ikao walked in and closed the door behind her to keep the meeting between the Hokage and an Anbu agent on the down low as possible. The conversation between the two women would be unknown to most people, but it would serious consequences for the entire elemental nations. 1 week later, Naruto and Ari were standing in front of the check-in box located at the village's main gate as our blonde-haired hero filled out a small stack of paperwork. The voluptuous Kitsune was using a powerful illusion to conceal her foxtails and ears to avoid unwanted questions from the villagers about her true appearance. Even with their cover story in place, it was more than likely that the civilians would try and lynch her for being part fox. Good morning, sir or ma'am. Please explain the purpose of your visit to Konoha. A familiar voice spoke to the couple in a bored monotone voice. Naruto looked up from the legal document to find Shikamaru Nara sitting behind the desk with an arm propping him up and his eyes closed. With exception of wearing a slightly modified version of the standard uniform, his former classmate hadn't really changed that much in the 1 year since they had last seen each other. I'm glad to see that you're still a lazy bum, Shikamaru. Naruto commented in a slightly amused voice. Shikamaru's eyes shot open and he lifted his head away at the sound of Naruto's voice. To the Nara's amazement, he saw a completely changed Naruto standing in front of him. The only way that he was able to tell that the person in front of him was Naruto were the faint whisker-like scars on his cheeks. Where was the bright neon orange clothing that he had always worn? What the hell happened to you, Naruto? The Nara asked in a shocked voice. For some odd reason, the lazy genius felt uneasy being around his former classmate. Naruto had always been the most easygoing and disarming person in the village, so why did Shikamaru feel like he was staring at a person that could kill without a second thought? I can't say until after I spoken with Bachan about the extreme levels of incompetence and negligence that Jiraiya showed on that farce of a training trip. I'll explain everything to you after I'm done with that. Naruto spoke in a voice that conveyed the seriousness of the situation. Shikamaru's lazy expression became serious at the implication that Jiraiya had committed some grievous offenses that couldn't be overlooked. It was common knowledge amongst the Chunin and Junin that the Sandaime Hokage had allowed the Toad Sage get away with a lot of things. The Kunoichi were particularly resentful of the fact that Jiraiya was repeatedly allowed to get away with sexual harassment without any sort of punishment. Fair enough, I suppose. What about your troublesome female guest, then? The black-haired Chunin asked as he looked the curvaceous woman with an eye of suspicion. The black-haired Chunin had a gut feeling that this woman had her own beef with the Toad Sage and tagged along with Naruto to lodge an official complaint. Immediately, his mind went to a worst-case scenario of Jiraiya committing an unspeakable act to a woman that could damage Konoha's already diminishing reputation. I can't say until Bachan is told and she is okay with me talking about it. Naruto spoke in a somewhat harsh tone that told the Nara to drop the issue. Shikamaru's face went pale as he felt that his worst suspicion had basically confirmed that Jiraiya had violated Konoha's green jacket manual. Without a second thought, he sent Naruto and his guest on their way before picking up a special phone that was only connected to the Hokage's office. The phone on the other end rang several times before somebody finally picked up. Genin Naruto Uzumaki is heading towards the Hokage's office to speak with the Hokage, and he's brought a guest. Shikamaru spoke into the phone before hanging up to continue with his job. He didn't question the fact that Jiraiya hadn't been with Naruto and his guest, as he figured that they ditched the Toad Sage at the first opportunity. Thankfully, most of the Rookie 9 and Team Guy were currently out of the village on various missions. So they possibly wouldn't learn that the blonde-haired idiot was back in the village for the time being. By the gods, gate duty is so troublesome. The Nara said as he put his head back into his hand and went to sleep. Chapter 5. Reunion. Riku Oda was casually walking down the main hallway of his lavish estate in a black and gold kimono made out of the finest silk that money could buy. In the eyes of the general public, he was just a wealthy merchant known for his generous philanthropic endeavors across the land of fire. But in truth, he was a crime lord that ruthlessly controlled most of the rackets in the country and several minor countries with an iron fist. His charitable organizations were nothing more than fronts for his lucrative drug smuggling and human trafficking operations. He was making millions of rim a year and he was looking to expand into other countries to gain greater wealth and power. Of course, there was a lot of people that were jealous of his success and him eliminated before they could carve up his hard-won empire amongst themselves. Hence why he employed a large security force to guard his estate from any potential assassins that his rivals may have hired. Thankfully, he didn't have to worry about any Leaf Shinobi coming to kill him as he had made arrangement with certain elements within Konoha to prevent that. I will not end up dead like my predecessor. Riku thought to himself as he walked past one of the many rooms that was occupied by one of his subordinates' family. His predecessor had been a very shrewd businessman, but he stubbornly refused to enter the most lucrative rackets as they conflicted with his precious religious views and his antiquated code of honor. However, Riku had learned a very valuable lesson before he poisoned the old man's morning cup of tea. That lesson was to never underestimate another person's greed or lust for power. It was something that had allowed him to live into his golden years and enjoy the fruits of his ill-gotten wealth. Perhaps, I should enjoy a private performance from my personal geisha before turning in for the night. Riku mused to himself as he walked past a shadowed enclave in the wall. During the construction of the massive manor, Riku had made the decision to install numerous enclaves in the wall for aesthetic reasons. He figured that he would keep fire bowls in them and have them constantly lighted to ensure that the enclaves would be sufficiently illuminated for his guards to see possible assailants. Unfortunately, he fell into the same trap that had led to the downfall of Gaten, the shipping tycoon in the Land of Waves. He decided to be cheap and save a few rim by not installing the fire bowls. However, the 60-year-old had been in power for so long that he wasn't concerned about his actions being a danger to his life. All of his rivals in Hai no Kuni had been dead for decades or too weak to use their limited resources to be threatening in any way. His rivals in the other countries were busy fighting each other to focus their attention on him. And, all of his subordinates knew better than to try and stage a coup d'etat against him, as their families were kept at the manor as hostages to ensure their obedience. Unbeknownst to the crime lord, someone in the daemon's inner court was brave and powerful enough to send a mission request to Konoha. Despite Riku's criminal connections to the village, it wasn't enough to protect him from an assassination request sent from the director of the Kemputai. Not that he would know about it, as the crime lord hadn't been able to gain an informant in the dreaded organization. If he had one in place, then he would have realized that an earlier raid on a nearby compound by the Kemputai had been distraction for a pair of ninja to sneak into his estate. I still wonder why the military police corps would search a compound that's been abandoned for almost 35 years. Perhaps, they had received a bad tip-off from an informant about a group of idiots trying to convert the old compound into an opium den. This could be useful information that I could use to my advantage. Riku mentally pondered as he got closer to the sliding door of the room that housed his personal entertainer. Before he could open the door, he felt a sharp pain emanating from his neck that hadn't been there moments before. Despite the pain that he was in, Riku managed to look at the door and noticed that there was a splash of blood on it at the same level as his neck. What was left of his brain power was able to realize that he had been attacked. "Get over here." A demonic voice commanded before Riku felt a tugging sensation in his neck. It would be the last thing that he felt, as a few seconds later, his head was disconnected from the rest of his body. By the time that any of his guards realized what had happened, Riku Oda was dead and his attacker would be long gone along with their boss's head. A few days later, Tsunade was staring at Naruto Uzumaki with a critical gaze as the latter returned from a successful assassination of a powerful crime lord that had plagued the country for decades. For the last year and a half, she had the younger blonde along with Shikamaru Nara training with the Anbu Black Ops under the strict guidance of Agent Nico. So far, the reports that she had been receiving were promising, as Naruto had taken to it like a fish swimming in water. This just proved to her that neither Kakashi or Jiraiya had been giving proper attention to his training like they should have been doing. Just one more thing to add to the ever-growing list of reasons for beating the living shit out of Jiraiya. The slug Sanin bitterly thought to herself. At least with Kakashi, there was a somewhat legitimate excuse for neglecting Naruto's training in favor of Sasuke. The last living student of the 4th Hokage had been under immense pressure from the Civilian Council and Shinobi Council to have Sasuke awaken the Sharingan. But the Civilian Council, they wanted a means to control Naruto in the possible event that he decided to get revenge on the village for the past crimes committed against him. Well, the Shinobi wanted it as a means of keeping a portion of the village's annual funding to continue flowing from the capital. So it was a very rare moment indeed to have the goals of both councils in alignment with each other. Well, I suppose congratulations are in order for completing such a difficult mission without detection. Not only that, you managed to get the head of the Kemputai to compliment you for doing such a good job. Tsunade commented as she recalled the praises that the director of the Kemputai had written in the message that he sent to her. When it came to dealing with Leaf Shinobi, the man was extremely hard to impress. He tended to view most of the ninja from the Hidden Leaf village as boastful idiots that caused unnecessary problems with their need to complicate situations than they needed to be. To be fair, the last time that the Kemputai had to deal with Leaf Ninja, it had been before the joint Sunagakure-Tagakure attack on the village. It was simple to sneak into the estate during the distraction created to divert the guards' attention away from their posts. After that, it was a simple process of picking the right spot to hide and wait for the right moment to eliminate the target. The hardest part was getting out without alerting the guards. Naruto commented in an even tone. Tsunade could only sweat drop at how Naruto was treating the fact that he broke into a heavily fortified compound like it was no big deal. She figured it had to do with the fact that the brat had been able to break into the Hokage mansion on numerous occasions without anyone knowing it until afterwards. In light of your exceptional performance, I have no other choice than to promote you to the rank of Takubetsu Jimin. The Hokage stated in the hopes of getting a more reactive response from Naruto. To her annoyance, Naruto just shrugged his shoulders like her announcement was no big deal to him. He had been doing missions that were considered S-ranked in nature, so being promoted to Takubetsu Jimin was nothing more than Tsunade trying to prevent the political fallout of sending a genin on such dangerous missions. Arigato, Bachan. Is there anything else that you need of me? Naruto asked as he wanted to get back to Ari as soon as possible. Tsunade's left eye twitched in frustration at being called a grandma, but she refrained from throwing a paperweight at Naruto. It was one of the few things that allowed Tsunade to confirm that it was Naruto underneath that intimidating mask and not an imposter. Tomorrow, you are to report to the 3rd training ground at 0800 and don't be late. It's time that Team 7 reunites. The Hokage ordered before making a dismissing motion with her hand. Naruto gave a quick bow before leaving to get ready for his meeting with his former teammates in the morning. The next day, Sakura Haruno was excitedly running towards the 3rd training ground at breakneck speed in order to reunite with her old teammate. It had been 2 years since she last saw the blonde-haired idiot as he had left with Jiraiya on a training trip around the elemental nations. With any luck, his skill had improved enough that they were going to be able to bring Sasuke back to the village. Of course, Naruto Baka will need my help to do it as he'll never be as good of a ninja as Sasuke. Sakura thought as she got closer to the training ground. It was common knowledge amongst the village that out of 3 Sannin, Orochimaru was the most powerful and the most knowledgeable of ninjutsu. Thanks to the Sharingan's ability to copy and memorize hand seals, there was a very good chance that Sasuke had learned over 1,000 jutsu from the Snake Sannin. Also, she remembered the day that Tsunade ranted about Jiraiya shirking his responsibilities on the training trip. So there was a possibility that Naruto didn't learn anything useful during his time away from the village. By the time that she got to the training ground, the sun was rising over the village's eastern wall. But to Sakura's amazement and shock, she wasn't the first person to arrive at the training field like she had planned to be. That privilege belonged to a radically different-looking Naruto and a beautiful woman that made the pink-haired Chiknin conscious about her own looks. The two of them were sitting on a large blanket near the training posts and enjoying each other's company as they ate a large breakfast picnic. What's this feeling inside of my chest? Is this jealousy that I'm feeling? She mentally asked as Naruto laughed at something funny that Ari had said to him. Growing up as a child, she always believed that Naruto didn't deserve any sort of happiness for being an orphan that nobody loved or cared about. She hadn't been alone in this opinion, as the rest of her class had shared the same view with a few notable exceptions like Hinata. But now, the blonde-haired idiot was being eye-humped by a woman with a voluptuous body that put the bodies of Kurenai and Anko to shame. It just wasn't fair to her. But that bastard. He was supposed to be training hard in order to keep his promise to me about bring Sasuke back, not flirting with some big-breasted floozy. Sakura mentally ranted as her shock turned to rage at the sight of Naruto being happy with someone else. Without even thinking about it, she stomped over to the happy couple with hands clenched into fists with the intent of clobbering her blonde-haired teammate. As the pink-haired medic got closer to him, she unknowingly started pouring chakra into her fists. It didn't matter to her that a chakra-enhanced punch could possibly kill Naruto, she just wanted him to suffer for being happy. Naruto Baka, you were supposed to be training hard to bring Sasuke back to the village like you promised. Not learning Jiraiya-sama's filthy habits and picking up some 2-bit whore. Sakura screeched out as threw a wild punch at her former teammate. Only to have a dodge by said teammate, while the black-haired beauty shooting a nasty glare at Sakura for calling her a whore. She had only slept with one person, and that was Naruto, so she wasn't a whore by any means like the gold-digging bitch had stated. Hell, she remembered how almost all of the girls in Naruto's class disgustingly fawned over the duck-haired emo. Just because I'm training to keep a promise, it doesn't mean I'm not allowed to meet another people. Naruto coldly stated as he got onto his feet to defend his lover's honor. He was sick and tired of being forced by everyone to give up a chance at happiness in order for others to be happy. During their journey back to Konoha, Jiraiya had the audacity to lecture him about the life of a Jinchuriki required constant sacrifice for the benefit of the village. Like that perverted disgrace of a sage knew the first thing about making a sacrifice. The only people that knew about the harsh life of a Jinchuriki were other Jinchuriki and their tail beasts. No. You're not allowed to be happy until I have Sasuke-kun his return to the village and is in my arms. Sakura yelled out as she took a step backwards at the realization that Naruto towered over her and most other people in Konoha. Naruto clenched his hands into fists in anger as they started emitting smoke that smelled like burnt sulfur. It was obvious that she was still clinging onto the silly idea that Sasuke would be welcomed back into the village with open arms after deserting it during a time of war. The civilians might try to do it, but the shinobi would demand that the Uchiha be court-martialed for desertion, and that carried an automatic death sentence. I made no such promise to you that involved sacrificing my happiness for the sake of yours, Sakura. He bluntly commented as his blue eyes started turning completely white. When Sakura heard him say that, it felt like somebody had punched her in the gut with an iron gauntlet covering their fist. She turned her head and glared angrily at the woman that acquired Naruto's attention, as if she were to blame in this unexpected change in her comrade. She would be somewhat correct in that regard, as Ari had revealed several key pieces of information to Naruto over the year about the village's legal framework. She didn't want her lover to be unprepared for the dreaded game of politics. This is your fault, bitch. You turned Naruto against me and convinced him to not bring Sasuke-kun back like he had promised. The pink-haired Chunin yelled out as she accused Ari of manipulating Naruto into breaking his promise to her. Ari simply rolled her amber-colored eyes at the accusation being leveled against her. She never liked the Haruno family as they had always been manipulative family that put their own desires about everything else. While they weren't as bad as the Uchiha clan, they were still extremely rotten and corrupt to the core. All I did was explain the cold reality of what will happen to Sasuke if he is brought back to the village. If anything, you're the one that manipulated him into making that promise in the first place. She coldly countered as she recounted Sakura's visit to Naruto after the battle at the Valley of the End. Naruto had been given a large amount of morphine to allow his body to properly heal from the life-threatening wounds that he had sustained. But thanks to his accelerated healing factor, his body was able to metabolize the drug at a much faster rate than a normal human. So to keep him sedated, the doctors were forced to triple the amount used than what was usually needed. This was something that Sakura had used to her advantage in order to get him to promise that he'll bring Sasuke back to the village. Before Sakura could deny what was being said about her by Ari, Kakashi appeared before them in a whirlwind of leaves. During the 2 years that Naruto spent away from Konoha and training with Anbu, the silver-haired Cyclops had changed very little in appearance during that time. I'm glad to see that both of you are on time for this little reunion. All that we're missing now is Sasuke, and Team 7 would be back together again. The veteran Chunin said with his usual eye smile. Kakashi opened his eye and found Sakura was crouching down and hugging her legs with one hand as she drew circles in the ground with the other. Naruto on the other hand, the blonde-haired Takebetsu Chunin was calmly putting on a skeleton-decorated mask. The Chunin had easily anticipated Sakura's reaction, but he was thrown through a complete loop by his other students' nonchalant attitude to his statement. It was like he didn't care about Sasuke anymore. I see that you're getting ready for something ninja-related, Naruto-kun. So I guess that I'll just see you at home after you're finished. Ari said as she started packing the picnic items up. Kakashi eyed the mysterious woman with a hint of suspicion as her body unconsciously moved in a graceful and seductive manner. While he was greatly desensitized to women using their bodies for seductions, he could always tell that they were deliberately doing it. But this woman seemed to sway her legs like it was completely second nature to her. If you're done staring at my girlfriend, Kakashi. Can we start whatever test that you have planned for us? Naruto commented in a very annoyed tone. Kakashi snapped out of his splendor and pretended to cough after being caught by his former student. It was bad enough that women in the village would shot angry glares at him for reading Jiraiya's masterpieces in public. He didn't need Minato and Kushina's son to be pissed at him for checking out his girlfriend. If Naruto is anything like his mother, he was going to need to visit the hospital after this. Right, sorry about that. The silver-haired Chunin said as quickly as humanly possible. Ari put a hand in front of her face to conceal the fact that she was silently laughing at the last living student of the 4th Hokage's expense. No doubt, the man was thinking about the many eerie similarities that were shared between Naruto and Kushina's personalities. However, she needed to finish packing everything up and leave the training ground, as it wouldn't do for Kakashi to have an unfair advantage over Naruto. Within 20 minutes, she had finished cleaning up the picnic and left the training ground. Now that she's gone, we can get the test underway. Kakashi spoke as he pulled out a pair of bells from his back pocket. Naruto immediately understood what was needed to pass this test. Unlike the previous test that had required teamwork to pass, they needed to actually get the bell from the man at any cost. Underneath his mask, the Jinchuriki smiled at the idea of fighting Kakashi. Besides, it was a good opportunity to measure his progress as he had never gotten a chance to test himself during his time with Anbu. All of his missions had been assassinations that required him to remain undetected at all costs. You have 1 hour to get one of the bells. Good luck, Kakashi said before disappearing in the same way that he had arrived. Before Sakura could make the suggestion to Naruto about teaming up against Kakashi, she found him disappearing in a cloud of fire. She was left standing next to the training posts with a dumbfounded expression on her face at the fact that Naruto had just left her there without so much as a word. That bitch. Sakura mentally yelled out as she immediately Ari for Naruto's lack of interest in speaking with her. While Naruto had indeed spoken to her, it had been in the defense of that woman and about his promise about Sasuke. But for him to completely disregard her without so much as a word was more than what she could tolerate from the blonde-haired shinobi. The pink-haired Chiknin blamed that foreign whore for turning him into something that wasn't easy for her to manipulate. That woman needed to be removed so she could force Naruto to bring Sasuke back to the village alive and unpunished. Perhaps I should tell Hinata about Naruto's girl toy and let her deal with it. The medic mused, as it was well known amongst most of the Rookie 9 and Team Guy that the Hokage princess had a huge crush on Naruto. But the plan to deal with Ari formulating in the back of her mind, Sakura took off to find Kakashi and get one of the bells before time ran out. Chapter 6. Fight and Mission. And the finalized harem at the bottom of the chapter. The ragged-looking Kakashi hid within the relative safety of tree leaves as he kept an eye out for Naruto's chakra signature. His clothes and flak jacket were sporting numerous cuts and gashes from recent skirmishes between him and the blonde-haired shinobi that always ended in a tactical retreat on the silver-haired Junin's part. To add further insult to injury, the skirmishes had been pure taijutsu fights with Naruto enhancing his attacks with potent fire chakra. I don't know where Naruto learned how to do such a thing, but it's clear that Jiraiya didn't teach it to him. Come to think about it, Naruto's fighting style doesn't resemble Frog Kata at all. The Cyclops thought to himself as he recalled the martial arts style that were used against him. It was common knowledge amongst certain ninja that most of the animal summonings had their own fighting style, with Frog Kata and Snake Kata being the most well-known. Kakashi figured that Jiraiya would teach the very basics of Frog Kata to Naruto during their training trip, but it seems that wasn't the case. So what did Naruto learn from Jiraiya during that training trip? Questions for later. Right now, I need to see how much Sakura has improved under Tsunade-sama's tutelage. Kakashi muttered as he spotted Sakura walking below him. But as he got ready to leap down and ambush her with a basic illusion, he instinctively twisted his body to the left. A few seconds later, a kunai on a chain whizzed past him and became lodged in the tree trunk behind him. It quickly became obvious that Naruto had used Sakura as bait to find him. A ruthless and utilitarian tactic that was generally frowned upon in Konoha as it put comrades in needless danger. Damn it, I missed. Naruto commented as he appeared kneeling on a tree limb that was across from the one that Kakashi was on. Kakashi looked at where the kunai had landed and his eyes widened in surprise at the exact location that it had hit. If he hadn't moved out of the way at the very last second, it would have been lodged in his head. It was now obvious that Naruto was actively trying to kill him. The silver-haired Cyclops could only curse at himself for getting caught staring at beautiful creature that Naruto had for a girlfriend. He definitely took more after Kushina than Minato in terms of personality, which begs the question. Was she some sort of silverback gorilla on steroids or something? He mentally complained as he recalled the terror that Kushina had inflicted upon people during her tenure as a Kunoichi. Just then, he felt a shiver of dread run up his spine, like Kushina had somehow heard what he had thought about her from beyond the grave. While many girls idolized Tsunade for setting the bar for Kunoichi, it was the red hot-blooded habanero that had been the stuff of nightmares throughout the elemental nations. It had only gotten worse as her 10-month pregnancy started becoming more pronounced. Are you actively trying to kill me, Naruto? The silver-haired Cyclops asked as he turned his attention back onto the yellow and black-clad ninja. That's when he noticed something very peculiar about the chain kunai's base that was easy for a lesser ninja to overlook. Kakashi had incorrectly assumed that the kunai on chains were attached to the bottom of Naruto's vambraces as they had been wrapped around his forearms at the start of the test. In truth, the exotic weapon was coming out of his wrists and he had deliberately wrapped them to mislead everyone. Well, you did stare at my girlfriend and I recall you saying at the start of the first bell test that the only way to beat you is to come at you with the intent to kill. Naruto offhandedly commented like he was talking about the weather as he recalled the chakra chain back to him. Kakashi was sweating now as he didn't expect Naruto to recall something that he had said to Team 7 from 3 years ago. It was obvious that the yellow and black-clad ninja's skills had developed significantly in the last few years, and it was showing. The only reason that the silver-haired Junin hadn't been seriously injured as of yet was due to his years of combat experience. I can honestly say that attitude of yours remind me of someone that I used to know. He commented as he thought about Kushina. Before he could reminisce any further about the woman that he had viewed as a surrogate mother, he felt the entire tree shake violently, like a bull elephant had rammed into it at full speed. Taking his eyes off of Naruto for a second, he looked down and saw Sakura standing in front of the tree's base. She had a fist cocked back like she was getting ready to punch it, which was pointless. Unless, please someone tell me that Lady Tsunade didn't teach her how to enhance her punches with chakra. Kakashi thought with eyes comically widened to the size of dinner plates. Sure enough, Sakura launched another punch at the tree trunk with an orb of chakra covering her entire fist. As soon as the punch landed, the tree buckled and cracked under the brutal assault. Before Kakashi could jump to another tree for safety, he heard the faint sound of bells chiming and the flapping of wings. He looked down and saw a magpie walking off with the 2 bells that were tied to his waist in its beak. He tried reaching for it, but the bloody thing took off flying towards Naruto. It landed in front of his former student and dropped the bells at Naruto's feet before dispersing into a cloud of smoke. "Looks like you lose, Kakashi-sensei," Naruto said as he picked up the bells. Kakashi, numbed by the revelation that he had been outsmarted by Naruto of all people, slumped his shoulders in defeat as he watched the yellow and black-clad ninja undid the knot tying the two bells together. The blonde-haired ninja had always been a bit slower in intelligence in comparison to his former classmates and tended to goof off more than take his career as a ninja seriously. This kind of underhandedness shouldn't be possible for the lovable idiot. What the hell happened on that training trip with Jiraiya? The silver-haired Cyclops needed to speak with Tsunade about this very disturbing change in Naruto and fast, as it was clear that something else was going on with him. Elsewhere, Ansem stared at Tanuki Shigaraki with a critical gaze as the researcher reported the latest failure in their attempts to replicate the roboticization process. He had expected some failure from his researchers as none of them had the same genius-level intellect as Orochimaru, and they were trying to reverse engineer technology that was decades ahead of anything currently available. But what he had just been told wasn't what he had been expecting. "Do you care to repeat what you just said to me, because it sounded like you said that many of my root ninja have refused an order to be turned into a cyborg." The former teammate of Hiruzen Sarutobi spoke in a flat tone. Tanuki gulped nervously as he had directly implied that the training regime that Dansum created to eliminate certain emotions had failed. Root training focused around eliminating emotions like love and compassion, as they had been deemed to be weaknesses that would distract agents from their duties. At the same time, there was a heavy emphasis on duty and absolute loyalty to the village in the indoctrination process. And that there was causing the problem. Dansum don't know, I can assure you that they're not refusing the orders out of fear. Many of them feel like the roboticization process would be detrimental in the long term for the village's economic health, as it simply doesn't have the manufacturing capability or the scientific know-how to maintain such units. The researcher explained the reasoning behind the agent's refusal to comply with orders. Dansum frowned at the news that he had been too thorough in his training methods, as the agents had cited a legitimate reason to disobey an order. This placed him in a precarious situation as his agents had been following his decree to act in the best interests of the village, but they had disobeyed his direct order to cooperate with the researchers. If he punished them, it may cause them to withhold information about potential problems that he might have overlooked. At the same time, if he didn't do anything, then it might encourage them to disobey other orders in the future. He was going to be damned either way. "I want a list of the agents that disobey your orders, and I will deal with them," the man behind the Uchiha massacre ordered to Tanuki. The researcher gave a quick bow to his master before turning around and leaving the office to carry out his assigned task. This left Dansum alone in his private office to continue with his paper that consisted of different ideas that mostly revolved around raiding Kaze's treasure conveys and pinning the blame on another country. A few minutes passed before he heard the faint sound of something mechanical moving in the darkest corner of his office. "I must admit that it is very hard for someone to sneak into this bunker and get into my office without anyone noticing. My sentries would congratulate you for achieving such a feat posthumously," Dansum commented offhandedly as he continued focusing on his paperwork. Suddenly, a pair of navy blue eyes started glowing from the shadows, followed by a few more matching lights that were located in the general area location of the chest and the shoulders. A metallic figure stepped out of the shadow to reveal an entirely robotic body. It was a lot like the chassis that Dansum's root agents had found, only it was much smoother and streamlined in comparison. "Very impressive, human. Not very many of humans are capable of detecting a cyber Lin Kuei like you have." The being spoke in a robotic voice. Dansum looked up to see a working model of what his best researchers were trying and failing miserably to accomplish. Could it be possible that someone else had discovered a similar factory and successfully recreated a cyborg to do their bidding? No, his spies that were spread across the continent would have notified him about such an event happening. "Who are you?" Dansum asked as he prepared to summon a group of root agents to come to his aid. He doubted that they would be able to defeat the unknown assailant, but it would give him enough time to escape. "I am Triberg. And I have come with an offer that will benefit us both, Dansum Shimura," the now identified figure announced to the head of Root. That single declaration was enough to stop Dansum from pushing the panic button hidden underneath his desk. This might help put his plans of robotizing his agents back on track and on budget. The constant raids on Kaze's treasure convoys were becoming more dangerous as soon a ninja were starting to help with the escort. "I'm listening," the man spoke as he rested his chin on top of his unbound hand. Unbeknownst to the village elder, Triberg hadn't approached him with the intent of helping him from any sense of kindness. The robot had its own hidden agenda towards Dansum's pitiful attempts to recreate the cyber initiative and was simply using the man to fulfill it. Soon, the Lin Kuei will reborn as the Tekinen clan. That evening, Tsunade was sitting alone in her office as she read the report that Kakashi had written on Naruto's capabilities. She was surprised and disturbed by the news that Naruto was able to produce chakra chains from his wrists and use them in offensive capability. Kushina had always said that the adamantine sealing chains were used only for Fukinjutsu, but Naruto had somehow managed to weaponize them without anyone noticing. Add in the psychological profile that Inoichi had complied on the boy over years and you have a very disturbing picture. Perhaps, the years of psychological and physical abuse that he was forced to bottle up over the years are now coming to surface. The busty Hokage thought as she rubbed her forehead. It was certainly possible as Orochimaru had endured similar ostracism at the hands of the villagers on the account of his appearance and his status as an orphan. It didn't help that Jiraiya had spread nasty rumors about him being a homosexual pedophile after a particularly humiliating sparring session. In many ways, Konoha had created its very own worst enemy with its actions. The village could ill afford to create another missing ninja that shouldered a massive grudge against it. She needed to keep Naruto busy and away from the village for a while until she could figure something out. Just then, Shizune walked into her office with a manila folder in her arms and a concerned look on her face. "Lady Tsunade, I just received a mission request from the mission desk that requires your personal attention." The former apprentice spoke with a bit of nervousness as she had seen the client as they waited patiently for his request to be accepted or denied. Tsunade looked up from Kakashi's report and took note of her long-time traveling companion's face. Well, it wasn't unusual for Shizune to be worried over nothing, but she was a Jonin-level kunoichi and knew how to handle problems, so for her to be worried about a mission was something to take notice. "What is it, Shizune?" the female Hokage asked in a soft voice. She always viewed Shizune like the daughter that she was never able to have with Dan like she had wanted. Well, a monk had put in a mission request for a particular team to escort him back to his temple in Kami no Kuni. Shizune nervously explained her former teacher. Tsunade raised an eyebrow in a questioning manner at hearing that a monk from the land of the gods had put in a mission request. Usually, monks would approach the daimon for such things and let them make the arrangements with the hidden villages. Then again, the fire daimon was well known for being an incompetent idiot that let others tell him what to do. This allowed a large amount of corruption to develop within the bureaucracy as civil service started looking out for their own interests and not general welfare of the state. So she couldn't blame the monk for going directly to the village. "What's the team has this monk requested to escort him?" the Hokage asked as she had a sinking suspicion as to which team had been requested. During the last 3 years, Tsunade had received more mission requests for Team 7 from potential clients than any other team. Unfortunately, she had been forced to inform them that the team had been disbanded and its members reassigned to other groups. She offered to send another team to complete the mission, but the clients would politely refuse the offer and withdraw their mission requests. "These requesting Team Kakashi," Shizune answered as she handed the mission request document over to her former master. Now Tsunade was facing a difficult dilemma as she had formed Team Kakashi to go after the Akatsuki and retrieve Sasuke Uchiha from Orochimaru. But at the same time, she couldn't refuse a request from a monk as it would send a bad message to the religious community. So she was left with no other choice but to agree with the monk's request. "Very well, I'll notify Team Kakashi about their first mission in the morning," the Hokage stated with a sigh of defeat. She briefly glanced at a small photo that she always kept on her desk that contained the image of her and Kushina smiling during happier times. The only time that she removed a picture was when she knew that Naruto would be coming to her office as it would lead to many awkward questions being asked. While Naruto had proven to be mature enough to be told the truth about his mother, she was worried about how he would react to the news that his father was the one that was responsible for sealing the Kikbi inside of him. She couldn't help to wonder if she was doing the right thing with Naruto. Chapter 7. Jiraiya's capture and journey to Kami no Kuni. Jiraiya of the Sannin lay huddled on the rocky floor of a cliff cave in the middle of the K's desert as he tried to gain desperately needed shut-eye after a long day on the run. Ever since Tsunade had learned about his gross negligence and reckless irresponsibility on the training trip, she had deployed dozens of hunter ninja to capture him to bring back to Konoha to explain his actions. While Konoha's hunter corps wasn't well known like the one in Kurigakure, they were still a force to be feared. To make matters worse, all of the hunter ninja that were actively hunting him were female. "What did I ever do to deserve this?" Jiraiya mentally whined as he involuntarily shivered as a cold gust of wind blew over him. He conveniently ignored the fact that he had brought his current situation down upon himself with his own actions. If there one thing that the Toad Sage had mastered over the years, it was ignoring the fact that he often created the situations that he often found himself in. In the past, the third Hokage would help him get out of trouble, and this created complacency on the sage's part. But now, he no longer had that protection and the consequences of his past actions were now catching up with him. This is all Naruto's fault. If he had just dropped the issue then none of this would have happened. Jiraiya angrily muttered as he blamed his godson for refusing to remain quiet about not being trained. To him, the brat's sole duty in life was learning how to harness the Kikbi's chakra in order to serve as the village's sword and shield against Inch Kriki from other villages. Like Lenoki of Iwagakure, there were many within Konoha that viewed Jinchuriki as little more than slaves to be used as they saw fit. It didn't matter to them that neither of the previous Jinchuriki had been treated as such, but they were gone, and they could put their beliefs into practice using Naruto. I was destined to be remembered forever as the one that trained the person that would save the shinobi world, not be hunted down like a rabid dog by a bunch of angry and ungrateful kunoichi. The Toad Sage dejectedly thought as the irony of the situation began to set in. He had spent the last 42 years exploiting the appearances of various kunoichi as inspiration for his pornographic novels, only for his actions to give greater motivation for the female hunter ninja to hunt him. It didn't matter that he was using their likeness without permission or compensation, they should have considered it as a great honor to have one of his characters based on their appearance. To add further insult to injury, Mott Ode had found out about his predicament and somehow had forced the other Toad summons to not give him aid. How could this get any worse? The Toad Sage complained aloud. Just outside of his cave, he heard the sound of a female voice urging someone else to move faster. "Come on, girls. I think that I heard something over here." The feminine voice shouted. Jiraiya quickly shoved a fist into his mouth as he peeked over the side of the cave entrance to see 5 women walking around the base of cliff. Despite wearing clothing that was heavily associated with civilian commoners, the Toad Sage could easily tell that they weren't civilians or commoners. It was a common trick amongst hunter ninja to dress up as civilians in order to get closer to a target and get into foreign nations without much harassment. Of course, Jiraiya had unsuccessfully tried to convince the third Hokage to make it a requirement that Konoha's female hunter ninja wear clothing that was more slutty. For the next 20 minutes, he watched helplessly as the 5 women as they investigated the area at the base of the cliff. After that 20 minutes had ended, the women formed a circle and were loudly discussing their predicament over not finding anything. "Damn it, I really thought that something had made a noise over here." The woman that had summoned the others. By the looks of it, Jiraiya figured her to be the leader of the group as the others seemed to follow her lead. "It's alright, Yukina. It might have been a bird or something." One of the other women commented in a sympathetic voice. Jiraiya mentally started commanding the women to go away as he didn't want to listen to them talk about their feelings and other such bullshit. It's one of the many reasons why that he never got married, as the Toad Sage didn't want to be tied down to a single woman for his entire life. That's why he remained single and spent money on whores and prostitutes in the event that he had a certain itch that needed to be scratched. "Oh, well. Want to have a lesbian orgy?" Yukina commented before suggesting to her friends. At hearing the other women agreeing to an orgy, Jiraiya Jr. began to rise, and the Toad Sage watched as the women began undressing themselves. The Toad Sage's eyes widened as he saw the large breasts that each woman had on their chests and bound up in bandages. The smallest pair had to be in the lower D-cup range at the very least from where he was currently hiding. "Oh, I just wish that there was a strong man with us to make us feel a lot more pleasure," another one of the women said before started kissing one of her colleagues. At hearing this, Jiraiya lost all control over himself as all of his blood rushed from his upper head down to his lower one. Dropping a liberal amount of smoke bombs and firecrackers, he started his unique introduction that he always used on people that have never met, seen, or heard of him before. "Greetings, ladies. I'm the gallant Jiraiya of Mount Mamboku, and I'm the Toad Sage," started to say before he quickly found his arms bound next to his chest in chakra-canceling rope. He quickly looked up to see that the women were fully clothed with kunai and wakizashi drawn at the ready. Each of them had a scowl on their faces that was a mixture between anger and disgust. A complete and utter perverted fool that is in a lot of trouble for shirking his responsibilities and ignore numerous summons from Lady Tsunade. The one known as Yukina commented as she walked over the bound Toad Sage with a sadistic grin on her face that would make Anko Mitarashi proud. It was just now that Jiraiya realized that he had fallen into a genjutsu that made him see what the woman knew would bring him out of hiding. His own perverted nature had been his undoing, and now he would have to suffer the consequences of his actions. He could only whimper like a scared puppy as the various possibilities of what his punishment would be flashed inside of his mind. Elsewhere, Naruto nervously eyed the monk that Team Kakashi had been ordered to escort back to his monastery in the land of the gods without having to pay anything. Something about the man felt off and it was making him feel uneasy about the entire situation. It was common knowledge amongst the shinobi villages that monks treated ninja as a necessary evil at the best of times and a plague on society at the worst of times. But this monk was acting quite friendly towards him and Kakashi to the point that it was unnerving. It didn't help that the former Jinchuriki could sense an almost otherworldly aura emitting from the monk. "I was hoping that you could answer something for me, Uzumaki-san." The monk asked a ninja of Hellfire in a curious tone. Naruto mentally sighed as he had a gut feeling that he was going to be asked about the current whereabouts of Sasuke Uchiha. When it came to high-profile clans from Konoha, the Uchiha were always at the forefront of everyone's minds as they were descended from the legendary Madara Uchiha. Of course, the village didn't like to mention the fact that the last 2 remaining Uchiha had betrayed the village. "What is it, monk-san?" he reluctantly answered. Despite Sakura's efforts to look like she wasn't paying attention, Naruto could tell that she was eavesdropping on their conversation. No doubt, she doing it in case of someone saying anything bad about her beloved psychopath. Is it true that Sasuke Uchiha willingly defected from your village in order to join Orochimaru of the Sannin? The monk asked with all seriousness in his voice. Naruto stopped walking for a brief second as he pondered on how to best explain to the monk about the situation surrounding Sasuke. Before his training trip with the pervert and the spent year in Anbu, he would have tried to defend Sasuke's desertion with the explanation that the curse seal on his neck had clouded the Uchiha's judgment. But after talking to Anko about her curse seal, he doubted that this was the case. Yes, it's true that Sasuke deserted the village on his free will. Naruto answered in an even tone. Despite continuing to walk like nothing had happened, Kakashi was stunned that Naruto had openly admitted to someone that Sasuke was a traitor to the village. Just how much had Naruto changed during his 3 years away from the village with Jiraiya? I see, and what would you do if he returns to the village? The monk asked in a serene manner. Again, Naruto remained silent for a moment as he pondered on what he would do. After their battle at the Valley of the End, he could no longer trust his former teammate as the bastard had driven two Chidori-covered fists into his chest and nearly killed him. From what Ari told him about the Uchiha clan, they were always a group that would do anything for power. The fact that the Sharingan allowed them to copy the techniques and jutsu of others just solidified the fact. If he's court-martialed for his actions, I won't speak in his defense. If he's allowed to rejoin the shinobi forces, I won't trust him and I'll request to be reassigned to another squad. The former Jinchuriki answered honestly. Everyone stopped dead in their tracks at hearing that Naruto wouldn't defend his former teammate in the likely event that he was put on trial. Even Naruto was surprised as he hadn't intended to say what he truly felt about the Rouge Uchiha, but it had slipped out. In Konoha, it was a common tradition for former teammates to protect each other from any repercussions that their actions may have caused. For him to disregard such a tradition was quite revealing about his opinion on Sasuke. I see, he must have really betrayed your trust in the past in order for you to turn your back on him. The monk commented. Naruto wanted to openly scoff at the biggest understatement of the century that he had ever heard. Sasuke had always been a self-centered prick, and the undeserved praise that he got from everyone had inflated his ego to the point that he believed that he was a precious gift from the almighty gods. What sickened him even more was the fact that certain people were trying to justify his desertion with the bullshit excuse that the cursed hiki that Orochimaru had given him was clouding the Uchiha's judgment. Let's just say the only reason that I won't be killing on sight is due to a promise that I made to my teammate and leave it at that. The former Jinchuriki responded as he shot an angry glare at Sakura's back. But that said, he continued walking without a care in the world. Naruto-san, you have stepped out of the shadows of your parents and begun deviating from the sanctimonious ideals of Konoha to forge your own path. The monk thought to himself as he looked on with interest at the retreating form of the new scorpion. Back in Konoha, while he wouldn't admit it to anyone and put up a bored facade, Shikamaru was deeply afraid of the ritual that he was about to undertake in a few days. As a small child, his grandmother used to tell him stories about the storied history of the Nara clan and all of its proud accomplishments. However, she had always been extremely vague and evasive about the clan's dealings during the time before the Sengoku period. It wasn't until he'd been promoted to Chunin that his father had finally revealed the truth about their clan. They were descendants of a deadly assassin that had died in combat and somehow returned to the land of the living as a wraith with powers over the shadows. Man, what a drag. Shikamaru thought to himself as he pulled a cigarette and put it in his mouth. It was no wonder that everyone in the clan took such efforts to conceal such a dark truth about its true origins. If word got out that they were descended from such a repulsive being, they would be hunted down and exterminated to the last man, woman, and child. It was one of the main reasons why the clan had put a stop to turning their members into wraith-like entities. Still, something big is happening for my father to restart such a horrid practice and force me to join Anbu Black Ops. The lazy shinobi grumbled as he pulled out a lighter. While he knew that smoking was bad for his health, he really needed something to take the edge off of his shoulders. For the last few years, the clan had been quietly gathering the material needed for the ritual, with only the Hokage and the uninformed members of the clan noticing the activity. However, the villagers were starting to get suspicious as the date of the ritual drew near, and the Nara clan were becoming less subtle about getting the necessary items. We just need one more thing and we'll have everything to carry out the ritual. Is it wrong of me to hope that they don't get the needed item in time? Shikamaru thought as he lit the cigarette in his mouth. While the logical part of his brain justified the plan as a necessary evil that would benefit the clan in the long run, his emotion were telling him that it was just plain wrong. However, he couldn't go against the clan as it would lead to him being exiled and his parents being punished for his refusal. Sometimes being a part of a clan was a real drag. The only thing that I can do is go along with the plan and hope that everything works out in the end. The Nara heir commented as he took a deep puff from his cigarette and let the nicotine do its work. It wasn't that great of a plan, but it was the only thing that he could think up on such short notice. But right now, it was the only thing that he could do at the moment. What if Naruto trained by Sub-Zero and Scorpion Mortal Kombat? Thanks for watching my video till the end. If you enjoy this content, then do consider subscribing to my channel and leave a like if you guys need the next part, comment down, and thanks for watching the video and see you guys in the next video.